Hello guys, welcome to this course on SQL Mastery. In this course, the focus is actually going to be on MySQL, as you can see on the screen here. But with this course, you will also be very proficient and confident in handling tasks in other databases such as Microsoft SQL Server and also Oracle. So let's begin. Before we actually start the course itself, I'd also like to highlight some of the key goals or objectives of this particular course. So let's see, what are our goals and objectives here? Okay, so let's start listing our goals. The first goal that I would like to achieve, or objective that I want to achieve with this course, is that I want to make sure that we all understand what is data model, how do we design a data model. A data model is something that is very important in designing databases. You really need to understand your business model, the different entities that are involved in it, their relationships, etc. So that's one of the earlier goals of our course. The second, the next goal that we want to achieve is be able to create a database. So database is basically a storage of information, or storage of data. So with MySQL as our focus and as our hands-on tool, we are going to understand how to create a database. The next goal would be to also understand how to create user accounts, for our database. So these are all the different people that will actually access the data and query the database, and then also these users, these users will have different privileges or different, permissions on different objects. The next goal would be to create tables. So when I say tables, I just using tables here, but we are also going to be able to create views which actually sit on tables, and views can combine data from multiple tables. So that's also what we're going to understand and learn how to do. The other thing is, once you create your tables, they're pretty much empty, right? So we need to start populating those tables with our business data, right? So we will be able to do that also in this particular course. We're going to create those tables and also populate them. Then once we populate the tables, we have pretty much half the work is done, I would say. The reason I say half the work is done is that you have all the business data, you have created your database or designed your database, and you have stored the information also. Now the question is, why did we do all these things, right? Why did we take all the trouble of designing a database and loading with data and all? It's simply because we want to answer some questions. The questions would be business related, and to help our businesses take better decisions. So initially we are going to answer some simple questions such as, what are the different products that we are selling, right? What is the total sales, let's say for the year of 2019, things like that. Fairly simple and straightforward questions, which actually are some of the basic things that almost every analyst, every data analyst in this world should know. So the next thing, after answering simple questions, we are going to move on to answering complex questions. So when I say complex questions, what do I mean by that? Complex questions can be as complex questions can be as easy as, show me the total sales for each product category, right, by different region. So which means that for each region I want to show the total sales for each product category. So I need to be grouping the total sales by different parameters that I pass. So that's one of the simpler complex questions, if I may put it that way, right? Now there are more difficult questions which are really difficult, in the sense that it is not only difficult to write the query or the SQL or the syntax for that, it's also difficult to process that. These are called correlated queries, where for every record that you get from one table, you need to run a separate SQL on the fly, to get certain other related information. So we'll come to that, these correlated queries and other things that we're going to I just mentioned, right? So answering more complex questions. And one of the important things to remember is that these complex questions are important when we start talking about analytics, right? It's not just about, show me a list of products, or show me the sales, etc. You need to be analyzing the data. You need to do a slice and dice thing. You need to compare one with the other. You need to compare current versus previous. You need to compare category by category or region by region, and things like that. You also want to be able to see subtotals at different levels. So a lot of those things will be covered in answering this in answer complex questions section. So next, we also want to implement certain checks and controls. So when I say checks and controls, let's say you have a database table where you're actually storing sales information. Now sales itself cannot be negative, so you want to be able to make sure that the system does not accept negative sales. There could be a business rule that your returns cannot be more than your sales, for a particular customer, or for a particular order ID or whatever, right? So all those kinds of business logic can be embedded into the database itself, and whenever the data is modified, either by creation of data or by modification of data, these checks and controls will kick in and then prevent any kind of data corruption. So just so you know, these checks and controls are actually done in the form of constraints and triggers. Alright, so next, the other thing that I wanted to mention in terms of checks and controls is also about permissions, which will come to in a few moments. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is reusable code. When I say reusable code, let's say you actually want to run a certain query to process certain information and display an output, and you do that on a daily basis. So if you want to do it on a daily basis, why would you want to write it again and again, right? Or why would you want to, let's say you want to save that syntax or code in a notepad or a text pad and copy paste and run it every day? That's also not good, right? So MySQL and any other database system, a modern database system, provides you to create stored routines. When I say stored routines, these are stored reusable programs such as functions and stored procedures. Once these are defined and created and saved in the database itself, you can invoke them as many number of times as you want. So that's the reusable code that I'm talking about. The next thing is manage permissions. So manage permissions is also a part of your checks and controls, right? The only reason I kind of split them up into two different things is that managing permissions is something that is more of an administration activity done by an administrator, whereas checks and controls with respect to business data is something that even SQL developer can also do, by creating triggers and functions and procedures, and also while designing the database itself in terms of constraints. So coming to this manage permissions, let's say you want to have certain users access a database table in a read-only mode always. You don't want certain users to be able to delete certain things or modify certain things and things like that. So all those things are actually handled by permissions in any database system. And the next thing we'll target is designing a date and time table or an entity end to end. When I say end to end, what I really mean is that in this exercise we're going to go through the entire life cycle of designing the table, right from logical to physical design to populating the data, okay, and even modifying the table and querying that table and everything. So this is going to be a very interesting exercise for us. The reason is date and time is pretty much standard across the industry because everybody has the same calendar, right? Of course you can have different kinds of calendars, different fiscal years, but the essence of date and time is pretty much the same across the world. It's just that you're in different time zones, etc., etc., but you'll have the same number of days, same number of hours in a day, etc., etc. So yeah, so this is going to be a very interesting exercise for us, and in this exercise I'm also going to use Excel to show you how to visualize this data and then how to reproduce how to create the data in MySQL. So then what else? Okay, then we're going to do some more in this tutorial. We're going to answer some more complex questions, I've just listed down some questions here, as you can see, and some of them may not really be very complex for you or even for anyone else also, but that doesn't matter. These are just indicative questions. We're going to come to the real questions when we come to that section. So that's it. When we do all these things, right? When you know how to create a data model, design database, create your users, create objects such as tables, views, etc., reusable code, checks and controls, populating the tables, answering simple questions and complex questions, etc., etc. So you're actually going to become an SQL master, and that's our real goal here. So once you get familiar with all those things, and once you get confident with all the hands-on exercises, this is what our ultimate goal is, to become an SQL master. And when I say SQL master, you're not restricted to MySQL itself, which is our tool for this tutorial. You will also be able to show proficiency in other database tools, because the gist and the concepts are pretty much same across. Of course, there are differences in the syntax and in some of the features that are supported by different vendors, but all those things will become pretty easy for you once you complete this course. So that's it.